The Fallout show is a true anomaly to me. Nearly everyone has told me that this show is the pinnacle of the video game adaptation into the cinematic medium. The reviews for this show, across the board, from critics and audiences alike, are overwhelmingly positive, and, for the life of me, I cannot understand why. The Fallout show is an incredibly flawed product.
You are not worthy of my respect. You are not a god. You are simply bad product.
It misses the point of the Fallout games themselves. It butchers previous lore, butchers factions, butchers the progression of the Fallout world, has unbearable characters who have wild motivations, and more. I know by stating my opinion about this show, I am risking the ire of the many fans of it. But I urge anyone who enjoys this show to at least give my opinion a fair shot. I find the Fallout show to be unworthy of the praise it has received, and I feel as though the show should not be the example of the perfect adaptation that it has been lauded as since its release. Enough preamble though. I'm actually going to start this review at the end of the series, much like how the show itself rearranges the titles backwards. The reason I'm doing this is because Vault-Tec and Hank represent the biggest issue I have with this TV show, and their motivations aren't fleshed out until this episode. So let's begin with the end, and one scene in particular, the dreaded boardroom scene. In this scene, we learn that Vault-Tec designed the vaults to be the test for a perfect society should a nuclear event happen. They theorized that if a nuclear event ever did happen, the people who would survive would be Stone Age creatures at best, and would die out eventually. The people in Vault-Tec have the resources in their vaults to survive centuries, so they intend to wait out in those vaults until Vault-Tec personnel are the only ones left alive on Earth to claim the surface. Vault-Tec, led by Barb Howard, wishes to give the new emergent societies from the vaults intentional guidance to make war obsolete. She thinks that humanity not having that intentional guidance in the first place led to war. So this is the solution. Give them that guidance that is necessary to make war obsolete. Then Robert House makes the obvious observation that this is all hypothetical, and then asks the golden question.
But we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
Barb answers that question with this.
By dropping the bomb ourselves.
The entire idea that somehow making everyone on the surface under the thumb of Vault-Tec would eradicate war and factionalism is ridiculous. Every individual vault has an individual theory about how to best run a society. When every single one of those societies emerges to the surface, they would inevitably disagree on which society is best for humanity. If a vault run by scientists come into conflict with one run by Bud supermanagers, they would have to discern which group should lead this new warless utopian society. Inevitably, the two groups would come into conflict because of their disagreements. Even if somehow Bud's supermanagers were the only people left to take control of the surface, people within a group can disagree about things. Factionalism is inevitable whenever humanity is involved, because we have a natural tendency to form groups with like-minded individuals. What if some people within Bud's supermanagers disagree with the status quo that the supermanagers are the ones to lead? What if the new generations want to elect their own leaders instead? Well, conflict and friction would inevitably result between the two groups. People within the same country or nation can disagree with each other, and sometimes it is to the point where war breaks out. Does Vault-Tec not know what a civil war is? Unless Vault-Tec can somehow change human nature, friction and conflict will always be the case. And just because Vault-Tec has a monopoly on everything doesn't mean war will be eradicated. Actually, the way in which Vault-Tec has designed the vaults, according to the show, makes conflict basically inevitable. Every single one of these vaults will have their own vision of the perfect societies, as I described before. So there will be conflict when they meet the other vault group who disagrees with them. This motivation for Vault-Tec to eradicate war is so illogical it loses any nuance whatsoever. Instead of making Vault-Tec an understandable but morally evil group of people, like what I think they were trying to go for, it makes Vault-Tec into illogical morons who are just salivating over destroying all of humanity, so that they can do some stupid-ass pet projects. There is no gray here because no one in their right mind would ever think that Vault-Tec's plan would work, except the writers, I guess. Barb's line, by dropping the bombs ourselves, might be the worst written line of dialogue I have ever heard. Functionally, what does this line achieve? We already know in lore that the Chinese dropped the nukes first, beginning the apocalypse. So this line serves only to characterize Vault-Tec. The characterization of pure evil is not a good one, and feels out of place in a series like Fallout, which thrives in shades of gray. If this line is eventually used to retcon China launching the nukes first, then the series is thoroughly destroyed. The TV show has a very anti-capitalism and anti-corporate message, which I'm all for. I love criticizing late-stage capitalism and corporations, but the Fallout TV show only goes deep enough to say corporations are bad. Vault-Tec are the ones delaying peace talks between the Chinese and America, and Vault-Tecs were the one to destroy everything because corporations bad. No depth is given beyond that. I legitimately believe the first episode of Zom 100 has a more layered and nuanced criticism of capitalism than the entirety of the TV show. Also, do you see what making corporations the cause of all the ills of humanity does? It shifts the blame away from humanity itself to the corporations. The war could have ended if only Vault-Tec hadn't intervened. We wouldn't have nuked ourselves if those evil corporations hadn't done it. Fallout always had a hard lesson to swallow. The destruction, which threatens our very existence, doesn't come from an idea. It doesn't come from capitalism, or communism, or liberal democracy, or the all-encompassing face of the corporations. No, it came from us. Humanity is the arbiter of its own destruction or salvation, and whether or not we are able to break the cycle of war. War never changes. It is always destructive. So we must change. Break the cycle or it will break us. This lesson shifts from an internal evaluation of what bedevils our society into a finger point. And no, unlike what a certain Supreme Court decision in 2010 stated, corporations are not people. I get what the writers were going for here. Corporations since the 90s have ballooned massively in power to a frightening degree, and I get criticizing them to such an extent because of that. However, the show is incapable of giving its critique of these corporations any depth beyond they're bad. And the way the show shifts the blame of the nuclear holocaust to Vault-Tec destroys one of the vital messages of the series. Thus, this critique falls completely flat and misunderstands what Fallout was meant to be. Fallout was a warning to humanity of what could happen if we didn't move past war, not a finger point to the corporations. Although I do love the sweet irony of having this anti-corporate show on Amazon of all streaming services. However, shifting the blame to corporations in the way the show does breaks basic logic. Why would these rich as fuck CEOs be the ones arguing and desiring to destroy the entire earth? They're the ones who benefit most from the status quo. They live cushy lives insulated from the ills of war and have every resource at their disposal because of their wealth. Usually, when people want to overturn a society, they are of the lower rungs in that society. They are often the marginalized and poor members of that societal structure, and tend to have very little stake within the system. Thus, they try to destroy the economic or political structure because they have nothing to lose. These rich, bougie business boys and girls have so much at stake in the current system that they would have no reason to want to blow it all up. The only reason they would want to is because they truly believe that they're helping humanity, which, as I already discussed, is illogical and falls flat as a motivation. Even if somehow their method of eradicating war was logical, I highly doubt these rich assholes would willingly give up comfort and luxury to be cramped in a vault for the rest of their lives. This show would have already been bad enough within the context of the show due to how incredibly idiotic it is, but it's even worse because it ruins two characters who were in the Fallout games. Frederick Sinclair and Robert House get butchered by this scene. I'll start with Sinclair. First off, what the fuck happened to you, bro? Like, damn, you really let yourself go and are about 20 years older than I would have thought you'd be. Also, why are you the one representing Big MT? I could be mistaken, but I always thought you were just a client of Big MT, not the leader. However, those are all nitpicks. Why is Sinclair one of the people vocally advocating for cruel experimentation? In the games, Sinclair never came off as somebody who was this sadistic and cruel like he does in the TV show, and Sinclair would be literally the last person desiring to blow up the world. This is contrary to his entire motivation in the Dead Money DLC, which, if you couldn't tell, I like that DLC. Sinclair built the Sierra Madre essentially as a fortress for the love of his life, Vera Keys. He feared that, in the event of a nuclear holocaust, she'd be killed. So he created a veritable fortress for her that would protect her from any bombs and outside attackers. The casino had every resource necessary for her survival, and, even though it eventually became her tomb, Sinclair truly wanted what was best for Vera. But no, he actually wanted to blow her the fuck up because war is bad and making everyone else Vault-Tec somehow fixes that. If you've played Dead Money, you know that Frederick Sinclair would never agree to support an initiative like the one Vault-Tec is proposing. However, that's probably because this person at the Vault-Tec meeting isn't Sinclair. He's just a caricature of the evil businessman, with Sinclair's name plastered on him so fans of the series can be like, ooh, I know that thing. It's interesting that the writers probably thought that they were putting in Sinclair for the fans. But if you are a fan and can recognize him, you would recognize that Sinclair was completely eviscerated as a character. Rest in peace, Sinclair's character and Dead Money. Both were done so dirty by this show. Not as dirty as Robert Edwin House, however. Oh God, no. Robert Edwin House is probably the most intelligent character in Fallout New Vegas. Unlike the pseudo-philosophical Kaiser who thinks he's smarter than he is, and the utter incompetent NCR leadership of General Oliver, House is a brutally efficient and cunning leader who gets results. He makes one of the best cases for why he's the best faction in Fallout New Vegas. Unlike the NCR and Legion, he has ideas for the far future and where he wants to see humanity. And he has somewhat tangible ideas about how to get there. I'm constantly mulling over whether he is the best for the Mojave, and sometimes, I actually believe he is. This show ruins that. It makes House easily the worst choice in the game, even behind the disastrous Yes Man ending. Robert House, this whole time, actually wanted the Earth to be nuked. This man, who stated to the Courier that he wanted what was best for humanity and did everything he could pre-war to save as many people as he could, actually wanted to nuke everyone to serve Vault-Tec. Okay, cool. Of all people, I would think Mr. House could see through the absolute bullshittery that is Vault-Tec's plan. However, he doesn't, and even states that it's a fun idea. There's a lot of earning potential in the end of the world. Mr. House in this meeting is more concerned over logistics than he is concerned that the entire idea is batshit insane. Also, his statement is straight up wrong. At a baseline, nuking the world back to square one is not what I call a lot of earning potential. It is quite literally the opposite. Everything these people built and owned would be gone if they did this, which would result in negative capital, wasted money. Every single bit of infrastructure would be gone. You and your perfect societies would have to rebuild all of it, and it would take generations to bring humanity back. So no, in Robert House's and everyone else's lifetime at this table, there is no earning potential. There is only earning loss. Also, if the entire idea of nuking literally everyone is to win the great game of capitalism, then this entire plan makes even less sense. How do you win the game of capitalism when you kill your consumers? How do you win the game of capitalism when there is no one else to make your product? How do you win the game of capitalism when all the infrastructure to send your products to people is gone? Every supply chain that keeps our modern world rolling would be gone. International trade routes with vital resources, gone. So how are you, Mr. House, the once formerly intelligent character, going to tell me that there is a lot of earning potential in the end of the world? There isn't. It is, by definition, a net loss for you, every other person on this board, and every human in existence. By nuking the Earth, you automatically lose the game of capitalism, because you kill everyone who would generate revenue for you. Mr. House should not be entertaining this bullshit unless he has an intelligence of 1, which in the games, he very clearly did not have that. But okay then. Now we know Mr. House was just itching to blow up the entire world. What does this do to his character in New Vegas then? Well, it completely retcons everything about him. His entire backstory about him predicting nuclear annihilation, taking precautions to protect Vegas from the nukes, and printing the platinum chip in order to protect Vegas from the bombs is all changed. Instead, House didn't discern the inevitability of the nuclear holocaust using his intellect, but it was told to him by Vault-Tec. House had no desire to protect Vegas, as he actively wanted it to be destroyed so there would be no competition. The platinum chip wasn't a part of his plan to protect the strip, but was actually just used so he could gain power in the post-apocalypse with his upgraded Securitrons. The entire conversation he has with the Courier was actually just him lying out his ass to get the Courier on his side. These retcons are all fine and dandy, but does this make Mr. House's character better in the context of the game? No! Definitely not. He goes from a very compelling character to an evil, mustache-twirling, idiotic douchebag who serves as an extension of Vault-Tec's stupid goals. One of the best choices for the Wasteland becomes easily the worst, just like that. Mr. House, this man who took every precaution to try to save the world from nuclear annihilation, was actually the one who's trying to annihilate it the whole time. So Vault-Tec, as portrayed in the show, is horribly written and disintegrates everything it is associated with. But, you know what makes Vault-Tec even worse? Cold fusion. Vault-Tec in the show is stalling peace talks between the Chinese and Americans because they need the threat of war to sell the vault. Well, you know what might be damn lucrative? Infinite renewable energy. You could give the excuse, oh, but that was probably only perfected by the Enclave down the line. But even if this was an early development by Vault-Tec before 2077, I would think Vault-Tec should focus all its energy on perfecting cold fusion. In the Fallout universe, China and the United States entered in a decade-long conflict with each other over energy resources. If Vault-Tec is so hell-bent on monopolies and ending war, Cold fusion could have given Vault-Tec a monopoly over that energy and ended the conflict between America and the Chinese with a new source of power. However, I guess the end of society sounded better than infinite power. Seems legit. Nothing about Vault-Tec in the show works. Their motivations are defined as wanting to achieve a complete monopoly over the Earth to end all war, but it makes no sense. Factionalism would persist even if everyone were Vault-Tec. Vault-Tec is shooting itself in the foot by having 122 quote-unquote perfect societies that would inevitably come into conflict with the other 121 perfect societies on the surface. Logically, it is impossible to ever justify murdering billions just in the chance that you could somehow end war based on the assumption that no other sophisticated humans could survive the nukes. This assumption is so stupid, it hurts. Their entire plan hinges on this idea that no one can survive the nukes. Out of 8 billion people, I am sure a couple will survive the nuke. There are so many humans that it is literally impossible to annihilate all of them. So no, this plan could not work if Vault-Tec had just thought about it for 2 seconds. But no, we're operating under the assumption that everyone in Vault-Tec is just a moron. It is okay to have a motivation for a character that does not make sense to an audience member. Take Thanos, for example. His plan makes no sense to me as a viewer. However, to Thanos himself, I can believe that he would think that that might work, annihilating half of the universe. The problem with these Vault-Tec execs is I don't think that they could even believe that their plan would work. Because it is so illogical. It is so beyond stupidity. There's no way any human would ever believe this, much less Robert House and Frederick Sinclair. That is why it doesn't work. Because in universe, I see no reason why these people would think it would work. What a piss poor way to write this group. Oh, but don't worry. I didn't forget about good old Hank McLean. Everybody's favorite character is Hank McLean, right? Hank McLean is introduced in the very first episode as a kind, loving father and a great leader of Vault 33. However, Hank apparently didn't put enough points into perception because he doesn't recognize Lee Moldaver at all despite knowing who she was pre-war. But that is understandable. I wouldn't expect some random dude to survive 200 years. Still though, all of them are visibly dirty and acting odd, so I feel like Hank, or at least more people than Norm, should have realized something was off. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Lee Moldaver and her raiders then lead a mass killing of the members of Vault 33, which, don't worry, I'll get into later. She then restrains Hank, but before taking him to an unknown fate, she gives the Vault Overseer a sadistic choice: the Dwellers or his daughter. Hank then sentences 5 people to death by explosion to save his daughter's life. A clear indication of what lengths he will go to save his family. Luckily for Hank, Lee Moldaver was just goofing around and let the Vault Dwellers run away from the bomb. These 5 people will never ruminate on the fact that Hank just left them to die, by the way. For the rest of the episodes bar the last one, Hank is absent because he's being held by Moldaver in the NCR's headquarters. When we finally do see Hank in episode 8, all is revealed about his character. Hank is actually a junior executive assistant of Vault-Tec, who was around 220 years ago before the bombs were dropped. He was cryogenically stored in Vault 31 with all the other managers under the guidance of Bud to breed with the populace of Vaults 32 and 33 to create a line of super managers. Hank lived in Vault 33 for about 15 years before the raid by Lee Moldaver. However, unbeknownst to Lucy, she and her dad Hank have both left Vault 33 in the past. Lucy McLean's mom, Rose, discerns that something on the surface was siphoning water away from the vault, so she deduced that civilization had existed on the surface. Rose then left the vault with both her and Hank's children, Norm and Lucy, at some point before 2277, despite Hank begging her not to. Rose then lives in Shady Sands with her 2 children for some amount of time before Hank comes a-knockin'. Hank makes up a plague in Vault 33 to keep everyone in their rooms while he goes to Shady Sands. He then goes to Shady Sands, steals his children away from his wife, and nukes the entire town in 2277. No, Todd. No, not 2281 or 2282. 2277 based on the internal logic of the show. Hank then takes Lucy and Norm back to Vault 33 where multiple people have died of starvation because of Hank's decision to lock everyone in their rooms for a prolonged period of time, which is fucked up in itself. However, compounded with him destroying Shady Sands, Hank is made downright despicable. And the reason Hank nukes his wife, who he stated he loved dearly, is because...
But you stopped being your mother when she left home.
She stopped being Lucy's mother when she left the vault. I cannot even begin to describe how much is wrong with this. When Hank goes to the surface, he has the ultimate refutation of Vault-Tec's entire ideology, Shady Sands and the NCR. There were people who survived the nuclear apocalypse, and they aren't Stone Age creatures. In fact, according to Moldaver in the flashbacks, the NCR capital was thriving before Hank nuked it. Instead of being a normal human and accepting that the dumbass assumption Vault-Tec made about the post-apocalypse was wrong and changing his ways, he nukes the evidence because it proves him wrong. He nukes thousands and thousands of people because they were proof that he was wrong about the world. On an emotional level, he nukes Shady Sands because he was salty his wife took his kids. I cannot stress enough that this is not how you write an interesting character. There is no depth to Hank. He is, by all accounts, a raving lunatic who cannot be reasoned with. The worst part about Hank is how the story tries to somehow make his actions reasonable. The scene where Hank is telling Lucy how he indiscriminately murdered thousands of innocent people is interspersed with scenes of the NCR and Brotherhood fighting each other.
Everyone equally afraid, equally miserable. Forced to do horrible things in order to survive. And Lucy, I had to make a choice between their violent world and our peaceful one. And I believe, Lucy, I know I made the right choice.
Hank states that he made a choice between their violent world and Vault-Tec's peaceful one. Well, Hank, no, you goddamn didn't. Because your and Vault-Tec's ideology was already proven wrong by the existence of the Brotherhood in NCR. Disregarding all of that though, this character cannot be understood whatsoever and shouldn't be made reasonable or justified. He led an unprovoked nuclear aggression against innocent people because he couldn't handle his wife stealing his children and that he was proven wrong. There is no justifying this character. There is no understanding of this character. There is no gray of this character. There is only pure evil and a raving lunatic. One of the best parts about Richard Gray, or the Master in Fallout 1, is how you talk him down during your fateful confrontation. Richard Gray is an evil character. There is no doubt about that. He's done horrible things, eradicated communities, forcibly mutated people against their will, and there is no redemption from that. When you talk to him about the morality of his actions, he doesn't care because to him, the ends justify the means. No one should agree with the Master or his plans, but the player understands why the Master is so hell-bent on making everyone a mutant. They are immune to radiation and seem to have very little conflict in their community, so it makes sense why the Master would see super mutants as the best chance for humanity. It's only if you confront him about the logistics of his plan that he finally concedes. You have to prove to him that the Unity isn't the best choice for humanity due to the sterility of the super mutants. Once he realizes that, he gives up on all of his plans and understands that all he's done in the name of progress was for naught. The last line he speaks are somber and filled with regret and dread.
There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have hope.
A very human end to a not-so-human character. Richard Gray wanted what was best for humanity, and when you prove him wrong definitively, he realizes that he needs to be stopped because he is a reasonable person. To a degree at least. That is how the Master remains perfectly in that balanced gray, and that is what makes the Master the best antagonist of the series. Hank, to his credit, seems to want what's best for humanity, but when he is presented with irrefutable evidence Vault-Tec was wrong, he doubles down. This isn't bad in itself because people do double down when they're wrong, but going so far as to nuke innocent people is fucking insane. That is where the disconnect happens and Hank becomes a completely incomprehensible maniac. If time is the apex predator, then let the NCR project die out on its own. Don't nuke the damn thing because then you admit to yourself and everyone else that Vault-Tec was wrong. Then, what happens when the survivors of this heinous act realize who did it? They're gonna come after Vault-Tec and destroy it, and then that future that you were so confident in is destroyed by the competition. Unlike the Master, Hank already knows that his plan won't work, just as it didn't work 200 years ago. Thus, he doesn't get to claim ignorance or say that he was doing all of this for the betterment of humanity. Hank nukes Shady Sands for purely selfish reasons, which annihilates any possibly interesting aspect of his character. Hank only cares about Lucy and Norm because they are extensions of Vault-Tec's goals. He proved that he doesn't care about anything but Vault-Tec with how he dealt with his wife. If Lucy and Norm turned against Vault-Tec, I wouldn't be surprised if Hank killed them on the spot like their mother, because Hank is just an evil minion of the detestable Vault-Tec. I know what people will say, oh, but it's just season 1. They'll fix Hank in the second season. No, They cannot fix this character. This is his backstory, and this is what they have to work with for the rest of the show. No matter where they take this character, he will be an unjustifiable evil maniac regardless of if Lucy convinces him to break with Vault-Tec or not. You can't nuke thousands and expect redemption, and if the writers want that to be the case, then they have some issues. Hank is an infuriating character to watch on screen because his character is just so poorly written and executed. He already comes with the baggage of being an arm of the already moronic Vault-Tec, but he somehow managed to be worse. He already knows the results of Vault-Tec's mission, utter failure, yet he decides to do the exact same thing Vault-Tec tried to do 200 years earlier and nuke the competition away. Doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result, as everyone knows, is the definition of insanity. And that is because Hank is an insane character, and not in a good way. I'm sorry, Paul Atreides. You deserve better. Anyone who thinks this guy has any redeeming qualities because he loves his children is insane like Hank. You cannot kill thousands and your wife and be called morally gray because you love your kids. That's not how this shit works. You know what happens when you put a tiny drop of white paint in a sea of black paint?
Fucking nothing.
There's also a logistical issue of how Hank has access to nuclear bombs and cold fusion. I'm assuming this will be explained in Season 2 where the bombs came from, and it needs a damn good explanation. However, there is a further issue with this. We're operating under the assumption that Vault-Tec has nuclear bombs at its disposal somehow. If this is the case, why haven't there been more nuclear events before the explosion of Shady Sands? If Vault-Tec was willing to nuke the NCR, then why hasn't the Brotherhood, Minutemen, Caesar's Legion, Boomers, Super Mutants, etc. been blown up? Because they would be competitions to Vault-Tec, right? Wouldn't they want to stamp out this competition too, just like they did the NCR? Hopefully the second season can explain all these questions and holes in convincing ways. But, do you see how this opens a huge can of worms? No matter what, there will probably always be some sort of hole in the story because of Vault-Tec's access to nukes. It still really does not make sense to me why a middle manager in Vault-Tec would have access to all this vital info. Hank has the codes to not only nuclear bombs, but infinite renewable electricity. Why in the hell would Vault-Tec entrust Hank with these things? Whatever. It doesn't matter. With everything I've discussed here relating to Vault-Tec and Hank, I do not want to hear anyone say that Vault-Tec being this evil is supposed to be the case, because it's satirical, don't you know? There is a way to write very poignant satire that analyzes certain aspects of our modern day world, and there are numerous examples of this being done well in other media. Satire is a very powerful tool to critique or explore topics relevant to us today, and it has been ever since the Romans invented satire thousands of years ago. Satire is not and should not be used to excuse horrendous writing. If you want a goofy, over-the-top, poorly written character like Dr. Evil, then you can have that. But then don't treat those characters like they're supposed to be deep and complex like this show does. I'm sorry, comparing Dr. Evil to Vault-Tec and Hank was insulting. To Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil has leagues better writing than the Fallout show, both because it is hilarious.
Thank you very much.
And because it's supposed to be bad on purpose as he's meant to be a parody character. Vault-Tec is not clever satire. It has no layered critique of modern-day corporations, and it betrays what Fallout was meant to be. Vault-Tec is one of the worst-written antagonists I have ever seen in any piece of media, and one of the worst adaptations I have seen of a video game faction into cinema. I cannot bear to talk about this buffoon Hank and the factions he's a part of anymore. You get it. They're poorly written. I'm gonna go back to the raid on the vault because, with context, this event is truly perplexing. Moldaver only needs Hank to access the cold fusion, so why does she go in guns blazing? Her and the rest of the NCR remnants start murdering the vault dwellers so that they can get to Hank, which risks killing Hank himself. Hank was in the middle of this onslaught and was actively fighting people. What happens if a stray bullet nails him in the head, Moldaver? No cold fusion for you, I guess. Also, we learn later that Moldaver is actually a caring person who cares for the people and wants to fight against Vault-Tec because, I mean, who else wouldn't be against what Vault-Tec wants? She risks her own personal safety pre-war by being on Vault-Tec's bad side, and by allowing herself to be labeled a communist in a very anti-communist United States. In the post-war, Lee Moldaver is this great leader of the NCR who is trying to give free power to everyone. She is explicitly described as somebody who cares very deeply about other people, yet she murders innocent inhabitants of Vault 33. And no, don't give me that excuse that she and the other NCR members are getting revenge for the nuclear bomb in 2277. She, of all people, knows how the Vault functions, and thus, she knows that all of these people she is choosing to kill are guinea pigs unwittingly playing into Vault-Tec's hands. She is knowingly murdering innocent people who don't know any better. This choice to kill these innocent people is retroactive character assassination for Moldaver because it is so divorced from every other description we get for her. I feel it would be more in character for her to try and liberate these people from their slavery to Vault-Tec. She'd probably explain what Vault 33's experiment was and what Hank did to Shady Sands. Lee Moldaver could then explain what the Vault-Tec's goal was, and that would probably be enough to convince the Vault Dwellers to leave the Vault. But no, she just murders everyone instead. I know why this was done to her character. It's so the viewers can get an expectation subversion when we see her later in the series and she turns out to be a good guy. She's basically an inverse of Hank. Where Hank acted good at the start but was evil all along, Lee Moldaver is made evil in this first set of scenes, only to turn out good in the Ghoul's flashbacks and in episode 8. Her actions are antithetical to her goal and her character. I also don't want anyone to say that this makes her an interesting gray character. Moldaver only acts this evil in this one scene and never again. This dark aspect of her isn't a continuous part of her character. It is introduced, then dropped just as fast and is illogical, so no, she is not a layered and deep character. In fact, one of her biggest flaws as a character in terms of writing is that she is too good. Besides the illogical character assassination, Moldaver has the purest of intentions for the run of the show. Her entire motivation is just to give people electricity and a better life, and pre-war, she almost solved the resource wars single-handedly with her research on cold fusion. There is no reason why anyone in the audience wouldn't support her or see her as the good guy, which makes her character significantly less interesting. This is made even worse when it's compared with her two main adversaries in the Brotherhood and Vault-Tec, both of which are abhorrent. The Fallout show is a story with very clear-cut good and bad guys, and characters like Hank and Moldaver are part of that problem. This is why I thoroughly dislike Moldaver as a character. She's too good and nearly solves all the world's problems by herself. Her character feels cheap, especially in the way the show debates the audience into thinking that she's evil from the start, only to then pull the rug away and show that she's a good character. The last thing I'll say about Moldaver is in reference to another bit of character assassination for her. The whole keeping Rose as a feral ghoul is messed up, and no human would ever do this to their best friend. Rose is clearly suffering, yet Moldaver, a kind and caring person, keeps her alive in the chance that Lucy might find them? It's messed up, and Lucy does the right thing by putting Rose out of her misery. What an odd way to write this character. Show us and tell us that she's a kind and morally righteous character, but then break her character for 2 moments for no logical reason other than it leads to an oh shit moment when Lucy sees Rose. Speaking of flawed character writing, I want to switch to the Enclave scientist we see in the show named Wiltzig. Wiltzig is not a character because he is never allowed to be a character. He has a very limited screen time, spending most of it as a decapitated head. Wiltzig, to me, represents one of the biggest missed opportunities in the show. Wiltzig could have been such an interesting exploration of the Enclave, who, if you don't know, are resurrected from the dead and openly operating on the West Coast again. I don't know how, the show doesn't tell us how, it just happened. Okay, Wiltzig could have given a deeper insight into what makes the Enclave tick. He could have shown what causes people in the Enclave to lose their faith in it. The show could have explored why Wiltzig chose to break with this faction after assumedly being part of it his entire life. Through his perspective, we could have seen what this new Enclave's guiding ideology was, what their mission in the Wasteland was, and if it changed after they suffered massive setbacks with Navarro, the oil rig, Raven Rock, and Adams Air Base. Maybe Wiltzig began to see through the Enclave's ideology and realized that it was wrong and against his belief system, struggling to undo years of brainwashing the Enclave has definitely subjected him to. A man who was forced to do horrible things but was able to rise above it because he was, at the end of the day, a good man. After he escapes from the Enclave, we could learn what relationship he has with Moldaver and how they came to meet. We could begin to understand what they meant to each other, and when Wiltzig chooses to sacrifice himself for the greater good, we could see Lee Moldaver's reaction to the loss of a good friend. We could see Moldaver grieve the man who gave everything to support her cause. These are all hypotheticals, but I hope it underscores how much potential there could have been with this character. Unfortunately, Wiltzig isn't a character. He is a MacGuffin, just a mere plot point given no other depth than what is in his neck. We don't learn about his backstory, his past, his relationship to the Enclave, to Moldaver. Hell, Moldaver doesn't even give a fuck when Lucy tosses his head on her table. In fact, nobody even seems torn up about the death of this character. Not even his own dog, who gets passed around like clam chowder in Boston. No one cares that Wiltzig dies, including the audience, because he never gets to be a character. His character gets brushed out the way so he can fuck around in Vault 4 and talk about blowing up penises or whatever. Wiltzig's lack of character extends to the Enclave. These fools get brought back from the dead, refuse to elaborate, then the plot moves on. The Enclave being back should be a huge deal to the Brotherhood, but it's not ruminated on at all, almost as if the Enclave never left. But this is also proven untrue by the show, because there's a character who's like, oh, the Enclave exists, which implies that they have come back. And I mean, New Vegas also proved that the Enclave was definitely gone by the 2280s. Most of the survivors in Navarro had already integrated into other societies by the 2280s, and we see this with the Enclave's remnants. So, yeah, the Enclave was definitely gone. The Brotherhood and the NCR hunted the Enclave for decades, following the destruction of the oil rig almost to extinction. So it feels like cheap fan service to name drop them like this. The Enclave should not be here, but if you are dead set on bringing them back, give them something more than nothing. Willstig and the Enclave get nothing, and it is so disappointing. I would already be pissed the show broke lore to bring these fools back, but their lack of characterization makes it so much worse. I've heard the excuse, oh, but Pacheesi's son, they'll fix the Enclave in Season 2. You can't judge them based on Season 1. Regardless of what they do in Season 2, their presence is an irrevocable flaw in the show's adaptation of the lore. From a writing standpoint, what is the point of name-dropping the Enclave if it serves no plot relevance at all? Oh, but it's to build up the mystery of who the Enclave is for the next seasons. First off, I highly doubt that, as the second season looks like it's going to Nevada, but sure, maybe the writers will bring the Enclave in. Second, if this is the case, and it's to build them up for later, give something to explain their return. Even a throwaway line would suffice. What should not be done is give the unspoken equivalent to somehow Palpatine returned to the Enclave resurgent. Somehow, the Enclave returned, and that is all the show gives us. Furthermore, the show should have had the Brotherhood of Steel soldiers match the audience's surprise when the Enclave is name-dropped, to emphasize how important this event is. This would be a neat scene for fans to have that holy shit they're back moment represented in the characters, and newcomers to the franchise would understand the gravity of the Enclave's return, despite not knowing who the Enclave is. The Fallout TV show's execution of the Enclave's return is laughably bad, and lacks any weight or added suspense. The Enclave comes off as a brief, meaningless bit of fan service when it could have been so much more. Actually, it shouldn't have been anything, because the Enclave should be fucking dead by this point. The Fallout world moved on from their heinous ideals. Fan service that breaks the internal logic of a universe is one of the worst writing decisions that can be made for a story. This is exactly what the Enclave is. Fan service that breaks the lore of the games that the show is trying to adapt. For what it's worth, I actually did like Willstig's character, but I realized I liked his character more for what he could have been than what he actually was. Willstig is an unfortunate victim of wasted potential. Someone whose story could have been thoroughly engrossing, but was made to be nothing more than the object in his neck. Alright, let's move on to Maximus. Maximus is an interesting character, not because he is well written, but because he is one of the most unlikable characters I have ever seen. However, I have to tell you who Maximus is first, so let's start with his first scene and track his progress through the series. When we meet Maximus, he is getting beat up by his fellow Brotherhood soldiers. After getting pummeled to the ground, his best friend Dane comes to pick him up and asks how his nose is after getting punched. Dane is the only person who treats Maximus with any kindness, which will be important soon. We then cut to Maximus in class, where it is shown that he isn't really a good student. And it is shown that his job on base is latrine duty. Maximus wants much more than this, though. He dreams of putting on the famous T-60 power armor and wielding the might that comes with it. However, this dream seems impossible to obtain for Maximus when Dane gets anointed to be a squire for Knight Titus. Instead of being happy for his best friend and the only person who's ever treated him with kindness, Maximus throws a temper tantrum like a 5-year-old because he's pissy he was passed up for promotion. Now, if it wasn't established that he was a poor student, and that Dane was his best friend, I could give a pass to this behavior. It's okay to have your character start off as unlikable, but Maximus comes off as entitled here, almost like he's owed the promotion and should be given it despite not deserving it. Also, this is his best friend. I would think that this would be the only person he'd be happy would get a promotion. And you might be thinking, oh, well, he might just be sad that the only person who's kind to him is leaving the base. Well, that's what I thought too at first, but nope, it is explicitly stated later that he was pissy it was Dane chosen instead of him. Damn, this is a rough way to start a character. However, this is okay. Maybe the writers just really wanted to make Maximus unlikable at the start to sell his character arc, and that's okay. So after Maximus throws his little temper tantrum, we cut to the next morning and Dane has been mutilated. Someone put a blade in their boot, causing them to slice their entire foot open. I don't really see how anyone could think this was anything other than self-inflicted. Unless Dane loves to shove their foot into shoes at Mach 10, they would have not gone this far into the boot without realizing they were slicing their foot open. Dane would have felt the blade before pressing down in the boot. So if they hadn't done it themselves and were purposely sliding their foot along the blade, Dane would have had minimal injuries at best. However, the Brotherhood officer immediately thinks it's Maximus, and I mean immediately. Maximus is interrogated by the High Elder of this chapter of the Brotherhood. The High Elder asks Maximus why he joined the Brotherhood, and Maximus answers, "To hurt the people who hurt me." Here he is referring to the people who nuked Shady Sands in 2277 and killed his family and community. Maximus's line here is a sign of deep-rooted trauma that this event must have imprinted on such a young child. Maximus's one goal in life for the past 18 years has been to get revenge on those that hurt him. Keep this in mind for later. The High Elder then asks Maximus if he mutilated Dane. Maximus responds no, but that he wanted it to happen. I could accept this if this wasn't Maximus's only friend. If this were one of his bullies, I would accept that Maximus wanted them to get mutilated so he could get promoted instead. Could you imagine wishing your best friend got mutilated because you're pissy that your friend got promoted instead of you? Being angry is fine, but wishing your only friend got hurt is borderline psychotic. Maximus is a protagonist who, through this story, decides to let go of his desire to gain power and hurt those who hurt him. But this arc is hard to believe when Maximus starts this evil. Too much change in too little time feels rushed and unearned. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Back to where we left off. Maximus is revealed to be so mad about getting passed for promotion that he would wish harm on his only friend. The High Elder is understandably surprised by this and tells Maximus that he is obviously in the wrong for wishing harm on a fellow soldier. Then Maximus thanks the High Elder for giving him a home, a purpose, and that he would be honored to die for the Brotherhood. This speech is so moving to the High Elder that he promotes Maximus on the spot. Dude, did you just forget that Maximus wished harm on his fellow soldier? Why would you promote him for that behavior? Later, it is revealed that the High Elder legitimately thought Maximus did mutilate Dane. So why did he promote him? I know the High Elder reveals that he thinks highly of Maximus because he knows how to take power, but this should not be enough to absolve him of what the High Elder thought Maximus did. Maximus should be punished at the very least for saying he wanted harm to come to a brother, and he should not be trusted to go on a mission of this importance with Knight Titus. This feels out of character for the Brotherhood, and for any military organization for that matter. After the interrogation though, Maximus goes through an anointing in this weird cult-like way because the Brotherhood was always a cult, right? Like, why are they a cult now? Whatever. During the anointment, Maximus gets branded like a cow to reinforce the fact that, yes, this is a cult. Maximus is sent to the wasteland with his knight who treats him like an asshole because everyone in the Brotherhood is a dick now. Titus eventually gets mauled by a Yaogwai, and Maximus chooses to let it happen despite having a clean shot on the mutated bear. This event made me question the strength of the power armor because Titus gets scratched a little and then bonked in the head, and that's enough to give him life-threatening injuries. Mind you, this same armor will later absorb dozens of bullets, so I doubt bear claws would be able to penetrate the steel. I mean, he does get dragged around a bit, but it still feels like the armor gets bypassed way too easily. So Titus sits there on the edge of life and death while Maximus goes and gets a stim pack for his knight. Instead of waiting for Maximus to, I don't know, save his life by administering the stim pack, Titus starts telling Maximus that he will be killed for allowing Titus to be mauled.
You stupid motherfucker, you know this is all your fault.
So obviously, Maximus is gonna let him die because he doesn't want Titus to get him killed. Titus, just wait until Maximus gives you the stim pack before telling him you're going to get him killed. But I guess you're just a dumbass who wanted to die. Like, just Titus, think for 2 fucking seconds, bro. Also, this version of the Brotherhood straight up murders scribes for freezing on the battlefield.
You know what they do to squires that don't do their fucking job? They string you up, Maximus, by your lungs, and they hang you and let the vultures come get you.
Jesus, I wonder who the bad guys are. After Titus biffs it, Maximus pulls his dead corpse out of the power armor and takes it for himself. Maximus then plays with the power armor for a little bit and shows off his power. This scene really made me think that Titus should have been able to handle one bear. Maximus then sees an altercation between two men and intervenes. He is clearly enjoying having power over someone at this moment. After that altercation, he appears in Philly. Don't know how he knew the target was there, but that's lucky he ran into him. Maximus fights the ghoul, which should be an easy stop for Maximus as he is wearing power armor. Maximus begins the fight by showing that he didn't put enough into the gun stat. When his gunslinging skills fail him, he walks up to the ghoul to engage in close quarters combat. The ghoul gets slammed in the torso by a punch from the power armor, which should turn his internal organs into Swiss cheese if the previous displays of the power armor's potency are taken into account. Of course, the ghoul is fine. Unfortunately for Maximus, though, the ghoul uses the armor's only weakness: stairs and weak floorboards. Maximus is apparently incapable of just, breaking the floor entirely, or, just flying out of the damn floor. So the ghoul gets the drop on Maximus and kicks pure steel? What? The ghoul has enough power in his leg to send somebody in power armor off balance without breaking that leg. Damn, okay, Gorl. The ghoul hooks Maximus and sends him flying away like a dumbass, which actually kind of looks pretty funny. Clearly, Maximus is not adept at combat or using guns because he gets defeated in hand-to-hand combat while wearing power armor. He gets beaten in hand-to-hand combat while wearing power armor. Yeah, no, my boy needs to do some more combat training. After fighting the ghoul and being sent 500,000 meters away, Maximus drags his armor back to Philly, which is impressive because he went flying very far away. I guess Maximus is strong enough to lug several tons of steel across a not-so-insignificant distance. Damn, strong as hell. Maximus leaves his armor alone while he looks for a spare part to fix his power armor, which is stupid as hell because anyone could just walk up and scrap it for parts. Maximus goes into Philly, gets the part, and goes back to his armor, which is already being scrapped by random wastelanders because it was left there alone. So duh, that is going to happen. Maximus then attempts to fight them 4-on-1, which goes about as well as you'd expect until the Wastelanders lift Maximus into his armor. Why would you put your opponent into their armor? How does this make any sense? That would just be giving him an advantage. I guess these random Wastelanders are dumbasses too. Maximus, while being put in his armor by his opponents, crushes one of their heads with the power armor glove, and they disperse despite still having the upper hand on him. Well, that was lucky. Maximus is then contacted by the Brotherhood of Steel officers and chooses to impersonate Knight Titus while speaking with them.
This is Knight Titus. Over.
Maximus, how stupid are you? There is no way this choice to impersonate Titus will work out in your favor. You will have to take the armor off eventually in front of the officers, and what do you think they'll do when they realize you were lying? Yeah, they're going to reprimand you and probably assume that you killed Titus based on the fact that you already mutilated Dane to take their position. Actually, this version of the Brotherhood would probably kill you for this. Just say Titus died in battle and you had to take his armor so it couldn't fall into the hands of a random wastelander or something like that. It would still look bad, but at least not as bad as pretending to be Titus, which is sus as hell. The Brotherhood then sends Maximus another scribe because Maximus told the officers, while impersonating Titus, that it was actually him who died in the battle and not Titus. After hearing this, Maximus freaks out and destroys the radio. This radio is his only lifeline to the Brotherhood, so now, if he wants to communicate with the Brotherhood, it's going to be really fucking difficult. Maximus, why are you such a dumbass? Maximus gets his squire, who turns out to be one of his bullies, who is named Thaddeus. Thaddeus rushes to get to who he thinks is Titus, and when he reaches Maximus, he is very clearly afraid of him. This relationship between squires and knights is never shown in any of the games. Squires have never been outright afraid of their knights before, and this makes the Brotherhood look even more barbaric and evil. Maximus is shown to be very pleased over the fact that he has power over someone, and begins to be an absolute dick towards Thaddeus, just like Titus was to Maximus himself. Thaddeus and Maximus begin their search to find the head of the escaped Enclave scientist. Thaddeus decides to use a Geiger counter to follow the trail of the ghoul's latent radiation in an irradiated desert. How do you discern what radiation is coming from the ghoul and what radiation is coming from like the normal wasteland radiation. Doesn't matter, they continue on their quest and have a moment to bond. Thaddeus says to Maximus, who he thinks is Titus, that he bullied Maximus to avoid being bullied himself. Thaddeus was bullied by others when he first joined the Brotherhood, and when Maximus came in, he suggested to his other brothers that they all beat up Maximus instead, thus getting himself out of the bullying. Thaddeus basically spells out to Maximus the cycle of bullying, which should have already been obvious to Maximus, but I guess not. Maximus starts treating Thaddeus a bit better, presumably because he realizes Thaddeus wasn't really bullying him for personal reasons, but out of necessity. Maximus probably also realizes that he's just perpetuating a cycle of bullying, which is not helpful at all. And in the next scene, Thaddeus saves Maximus's life, so that's another major reason why Maximus starts to treat Thaddeus better. Speaking of that scene, Maximus gets jumped by a gulper. Thaddeus shows off his gun skill and nails the gulper in the head, but it doesn't die. It starts coming after Thaddeus, but Maximus is able to save him in time. The two of them retrieve the target's head from the corpse of the gulper. They then camp out under a bridge, and after some bonding, Thaddeus asks to be branded by Maximus, who he actually thinks is Knight Titus. Maximus, why would you do this to Thaddeus? This is what I assume to be a massive honor for these members of the Brotherhood. What happens when you eventually reveal to Thaddeus and the rest of the Brotherhood that you're not actually Titus? Thaddeus is going to be rightfully pissed with you that you took this honor away from him and that you lied to him and probably assumed that you killed Titus to get the armor. Please, Maximus, just think for 4 consecutive seconds before doing shit. Taking away Thaddeus' honor of being branded is really fucked up for Maximus to do, and it's just because he's an idiot. Then, Maximus reveals to Thaddeus that he isn't Titus at all, but was actually Maximus all along. And he says it in the most suspicious way imaginable.
Where's Knight Titus?
He's dead. So, you know, you and I, we just have to get our story straight.
Thaddeus correctly states that the brother will kill Maximus for what he's done. Maximus says that the Brotherhood doesn't have to find out. Motherfucker, what do you mean they won't find out? As soon as you appear at the base, they will find out you were lying and assume the worst. Thaddeus doesn't support Maximus, obviously, because he would probably be killed too for aiding Maximus in this scheme. Maximus, realizing that Thaddeus won't help him, decides to kill him right there on the spot, because Thaddeus is now a threat to Maximus' rise to power in the Brotherhood. This is yet another moment where Maximus is really damn sinister. Poor Thaddeus gets his foot crushed by Maximus before he's able to remove Maximus' fusion core, which powers his armor. Now, keep in mind, this is the second scene where Maximus has been beaten in hand-to-hand combat by somebody not in power armor. How is he this bad at combat? When Thaddeus takes the fusion core out, this leaves Maximus completely immobile, which is thoroughly idiotic, because why in the fuck would you design the armor to be immobile without a core? What if the core malfunctions? Is the user just fucked and condemned to die of thirst or starvation if they're alone? In the game, when there is no fusion, you can still get in and out of the armor because that makes sense. In the TV show, this immobility without a core is a massive design flaw, which should not be there logically, but we needed Maximus and Lucy to run into each other. So Thaddeus leaves and Maximus is sitting there for hours until Lucy finds him. Lucy randomly finds Maximus, and I mean literally randomly, she just comes across him. When Lucy finds Maximus, he is getting attacked by rad roaches, so she kills the rad roaches and opens his helmet to let him breathe. Lucy and Maximus come to a deal where she lets him out of the armor and he gives her right away.
What's your name?
I'm Knight Titus.
Stop saying your name is Titus, dumbass. Lucy and Maximus start traveling together so she can get her dad and he can get the head. Maximus and Lucy start talking while they're traveling, and Maximus tells Lucy about the bombs he survived as a kid. You know, the ones that Hank used against innocent people because competition bad. Yeah, those ones. Lucy foreshadows the reveal that she actually did live outside the vault as a child, which would be cool if the reveal wasn't fucking stupid. After a while, they encounter 2 random people, which leads to an intense standoff. It ends with a short duel where Maximus is able to shoot 2 people in the head and neck while suffering only a shot to his arm. Wait a minute. In every other scene, Maximus is shown to be shit with guns. So where did these skills come from? I mean, the gun wasn't even in his holster. He had to reach over to Lucy, take the gun, aim at one person, shoot, aim at the other, shoot, before they could even fire a well-placed shot. Like, damn, Maximus. I guess in the course of a day or two, you've become a gunslinging god. Good for you, man. Lucy, being the innocent vault dweller she is horrified by the death of these two people. She then comments on the fact that Maximus has been shot, which he says is just a scratch. My guy, if you don't get that bullet out and disinfect the wound, you could literally die to an infection. You could bleed the fuck out. Just to scratch my ass, Maximus. Lucy and Maximus then come upon the crater of Shady Sands, and Lucy laments the fact that the vault's entire purpose, Reclamation Day, was for nothing because society has already begun again without Vault-Tec. Maximus then says, well, if it makes you feel any better, it didn't work out, which is one hell of a way to describe a nuclear bomb falling on the NCR's capital. Lucy asks what happened to the Shady Sands, to which Maximus says, everyone wants to save the world. They just disagree on how. This actually makes me wonder who Maximus thought nuked his home, because at this point he doesn't know it's Hank. So who did he think was disagreeing with the NCR on how to run the world? Maximus starts bleeding out because of course he is. He left a bullet in his arm and didn't care to do anything about it. 2 seconds after he starts bleeding out, both he and Lucy fall into Vault 4 where people start taking care of Maximus and his arm. Well, that's convenient. The Vault 4 dwellers also managed to find Maximus's power armor, drag it across the wasteland, and put it safely in the vault. Well, that's convenient, and also probably impossible because that thing weighs a shit ton. Also, how did they even find the damn thing? It's not like Maximus had a tracker on it. Anyway, Maximus and Lucy are left alone in their containment room where they have some very strange dialogue.
You smell good.
What?
You want to have sex?
You mean use my cock? Weird thing could happen.
What weird thing?
Well, it's just for some guys, not me. But for some guys, you know, when they make it move, it gets all big and hard like a big pimple and then it pops. And it's it could happen to anybody, but still, it's gross.
Why does Maximus not know what a damn boner is? The Brotherhood should have taught him this shit. They have classes, bruh, in school. They, educate their... They make sure that their members are very well educated. This should not be the case. It's literally just goofy dialogue for the sake of goofy dialogue. It makes no damn sense. Lucy and Maximus are released into the vault where Jerry Smith, the overseer, comes and talks to Lucy and Maximus. He makes sure to say that they shouldn't go into Vault 12 in a very ominous way. And he has one eye. I thought I should have mentioned that. After this conversation, Maximus goes to find his armor. He finds it and tries to secure a fusion core for it. He finds one in the vault's reactor and almost takes it for his armor, which would have left the entire vault without power, forcing all of these people to the surface where they probably would have died. Just so it's clear that Maximus is indeed a massive asshole. These people have also been nothing but kind to Maximus. They have given him food, treated his wounds, given him a room. Why would he do this to them? Maximus is given his own room by the Vault Dwellers and finally lives in true comfort with all the food, entertainment, and security he could ever need. He spends a few hours enjoying this comfort until he sees Lucy being taken in by Vault guards due to her entering the forbidden level 12. Maximus has an epic character moment where he chooses Lucy over his newfound comfort in Vault community. I'm sorry, is this supposed to be impactful or suspenseful? We already know that Maximus has a massive boner for Lucy, so of course he's going to choose her over the luxury of the vault. Comfort or saving a loved one has never been a part of Maximus's character before. This just feels really out of place and weird. I really don't know what they were trying to go for here with this. Maximus then steals the fusion core from the vault and gets his armor. He goes to where he thinks they're about to execute Lucy, and despite it being obvious she isn't in any danger, he starts destroying everything and everyone. My dude, she is literally standing there without restraints. She is screaming at you to stop. What the fuck is wrong with you? Lucy calms down Maximus and they leave the vault. Lucy remembers that Maximus stole the Vault Dwellers' fusion core and asks Maximus to give it back to the Vault Dwellers because they are doomed without power. Maximus argues against giving it back to the Dwellers because robot suit is fun. He wants to doom a community because he likes to use his little robot suit. This community is comprised of the people who were displaced after the nuking of Shady Sands. Maximus should have a lot of sympathy for these people as he was in the exact same boat, being a survivor of Shady Sands. But no, he wants to doom a community because he likes to use his little robot suit. Maximus is just the biggest asshole. Lucy, after a not so insignificant back and forth, finally convinces Maximus to do the right thing and give the Vault Dwellers their power back. Damn bro, you gonna cry because you're doing the right thing? Lucy offers Maximus a place in Vault 33 and calls Maximus the best and kindest stranger she's met on the surface. Maximus admits to Lucy that he isn't a good person and that he let Titus die and stole his armor. He admits to lying to Lucy, and her response is to say that the wasteland sucks. She just brushes past the fact that Maximus let a man die so he could get his armor, which seems out of character for the very morally cognizant Lucy. I get that the wasteland has hardened her, but this seems a tad too far for her to just brush off so cavalierly. She then asks again if Maximus would live in Vault 33, to which he says yes. Maximus and Lucy go out and find the head of the Enclave scientists in the hands of Thaddeus. Last time we saw Thaddeus, his foot was crushed by Maximus in the power armor. While Lucy and Maximus were in Vault 4, Thaddeus walked miles across the wasteland before he found a doctor to cure his foot. It is a miracle Thaddeus didn't get a single infection in his foot during this time, and it is a miracle he even has a somewhat intact foot, because that thing should probably be gone due to the force of the power armor. The doctor Thaddeus finds gives him a drug that turns him into a ghoul, and because ghouls have a Wolverine-style healing factor, he gets his foot back. What? Ghouls don't have a healing factor, and the only time they regenerate in the game is when they're in very intense radiation, which Thaddeus is not in this scene. I'll get more into this when we go into the ghoul later, so just remember this. Thaddeus, with his newly acquired Wolverine powers, goes to a radio tower to contact the Brotherhood for evac. When Thaddeus sees Maximus approach with Lucy, he instinctively unloads like 15 shots in his direction, and all of them miss because Maximus has plot armor. Two problems with this. First, why does Thaddeus have no recoil when shooting? His gun does not move from its static position when it definitely should be. 10mm would have some kick. Second, why is Thaddeus now so bad with guns? He absolutely domed the Gulper just a bit ago, but can't land a single shot now. The reason the show gives is that Thaddeus sucks without a scope, which I don't buy. Every Brotherhood squire should be taught how to fire a basic sidearm. It makes no sense why Thaddeus would have only been trained how to shoot with a scope. This is just blatant plot armor for Lucy and Maximus. Conveniently for Maximus, Thaddeus steps on a booby trap, gets impaled through the neck, and doesn't die. Ghouls are immortal to damage below the head, don't you remember? Thaddeus realizes that he can't go back to the Brotherhood because they hate ghouls, so Maximus offers to take the head so Thaddeus can run away. Thaddeus thanks Maximus for this act and apologizes to Maximus. Thaddeus should not be apologizing here because Maximus is the reason he became a ghoul. If his foot wasn't obliterated by Maximus, he wouldn't have to go to that sus doctor. Thaddeus should be tearing into Maximus for the evil shit he's done and for trying to kill him, but before he's able to, he gets impaled by the arrow. How convenient for Maximus, as Thaddeus would have exposed Maximus for the evil shit he is right in front of Lucy, and then Lucy wouldn't want him in the vault. This was the perfect moment for Maximus to be punished for what he's done, and he gets away with everything because the plot doesn't want to spend time on it. Fuck this writing. So Thaddeus apologizes to the man who tried to kill him.
I'm sorry about a lot of things. Didn't mean for... Okay, nice to meet you. Bye.
And Maximus takes a random head from the ground and gives Lucy the real head. That sounded really sus. He tells her to get her dad and leave him to his fate with the Brotherhood. They kiss because boners, and Lucy leaves for her dad. Maximus is picked up by the Brotherhood and is most likely going to be killed for his treachery. They take Maximus to Philly. Wait, what? The Brotherhood forcibly conquered Philly. The Brotherhood doesn't conquer towns and lord over people. In no games have they ever done this. This is so far removed from who the Brotherhood were that this faction in the show doesn't even feel like the Brotherhood of Steel anymore. Maximus is taken in front of the High Elder and presents the wrong head to him. The High Elder immediately figures out that Maximus is lying and that he brought him the wrong head. The soldiers begin to restrain him for execution, and some weird monk clerk guys start chanting because the Brotherhood is a cult. Just like how they were in the games, right? As Maximus is about to be shot, Dane pleads with the High Elder to keep Maximus alive, and Dane admits to slashing their own foot to get out of their duties as a scribe. Dane, did you really think you could just injure yourself, not admit to it, and the Brotherhood wouldn't search for the person who did it? Obviously, the Brotherhood would want to know who mutilated one of their soldiers. Why is everyone in the Brotherhood a dumbass?
Such a display of loyalty. Don't see that much anymore.
Dude, what the fuck does that even mean? What do you mean there isn't much loyalty anymore? All these loyal soldiers doing your every command aren't loyal? Anyway, This display is enough to save Maximus's life. The Elder takes Maximus to a back room to have a little chat. The High Elder then says some vague statement about how the Brotherhood has lost its way, and then says that they once ruled the Wastes and will do it again. Mr. High Elder, no, you never ruled the Wastes, you dumbass. The Brotherhood has always stayed out of the power structure in every game they've been in. They do not conquer towns or cities. They've always done their own thing because they believe protecting humanity from themselves is more important. See what I mean when I say this doesn't feel like the Brotherhood? The High Elder says that if Maximus gets the head, the High Elder will revitalize the Brotherhood with him at its head and Maximus as his right-hand man. Ah, yes. I would trust the guy who's killed one of my soldiers, tried to kill another one of them, and directly betrayed me by bringing back the wrong head and lying about it. Why can't Maximus get punished for anything he's done? It makes no goddamn sense the way he fails upwards. It's infuriating to watch, and it makes the Brotherhood look more moronic than they already did. Maximus should be heavily reprimanded for what he's done. Going by what the show has depicted, this version of the Brotherhood would probably torture Maximus for the location of the head and then kill him afterwards. But that can't happen because Maximus has plot armor. So Maximus is sent with an army of Brotherhood members to secure the head. And how does he know where it is? Well, maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I legitimately don't know how Maximus has the location of the head. Maybe he looked at Lucy's Pip-Boy at the coordinates and memorized them perfectly? Before the Brotherhood are sent out to get the head, Maximus talks with Dane and tells them his plan to leave the Brotherhood with Lucy. He says that he wants to live in a vault where there is no war and it's peaceful. Maximus is a character defined by his single-minded goal to bring pain to those who hurt him. He has had this goal for 19 years. His motivation is born out of a deep trauma inflicted on him by the bombing of Shady Sands. Maximus lost all of his family, his friends, his community, his home. The Brotherhood represents power to Maximus, the power to enact his revenge, the strength to bring justice to whoever wronged him. Maximus has done horrible things to gain this power. He's hurt innocent people because they stood in his way. His moral compass is thoroughly broken from the Brotherhood's indoctrination and from his childhood trauma. Maximus has become consumed by his necessity for revenge to the point that he has basically lost his humanity. 19 years, this has been his purpose, and he gets over it in a matter of days. He gets over his childhood trauma, his deep-seated desire for revenge because of Lucy. I see a reality where this might have actually worked. If Lucy helped Maximus through his past, especially when they were at the crater of Shady Sands, this could have been better. Maximus could have maybe broken down when he saw what was once his home, and Lucy could have been there to listen to his story. Maximus could have told her why he joined the Brotherhood, and Lucy, being the kind-hearted person she is, told him he needed to let go of his desire for revenge. She could have told Maximus that he should never forgive who'd done this horrible act, but that he has to move on lest he become consumed by rage and anger for the rest of his life. This could begin the healing process for Maximus. Maximus is seemingly a character designed to be punished at some point. He's done horrible things for the wrong reasons, and, to learn, he as a character should be punished for it by others. And it's just basic logic. You do horrible things, the people around you will punish you for that. The character who should have done the punishment is Thaddeus. Maximus's desire to gain power at all costs hurt Thaddeus the most, and permanently altered his life for the worst by making him a ghoul. Thaddeus should have called Maximus out for being an evil asshole, and Maximus should have been the one to ask for forgiveness, realizing that Thaddeus was right. Lucy would learn about everything Maximus had done, and she should be horrified by it. However, Maximus could express regret over what he'd done, and promise to turn a new leaf. I don't know if Lucy would still be romantically interested in him after that, but at least Maximus could learn once and for all that gaining power no matter the cost is wrong. That way of thinking hurts the wrong people in the end, something Maximus never thought of. Then, you could have Maximus start to alter his motivation from revenge to finding a home by living a peaceful life in the vault with Lucy. The show doesn't do anything to earn Maximus's complete life change here. It doesn't take the time to develop his and Lucy's relationship, and it doesn't take the time to have Maximus progress past his trauma in revenge. It's just dropped because he has a boner for Lucy. Now, I love boners as much as the next guy. Wait, what? But they are not a cure-all for deep-rooted childhood trauma and a flawed sense of morality. I know my suggestions are probably shite and very cliche. I'm not a writer after all. but I hope it illustrates what could have been done with a character like Maximus and how much is lacking. After telling Dane his life-altering decision to abandon the Brotherhood, they get sent to the NCR headquarters to get the artifact. Bombs and more explosions later, and Maximus is in the main room with Lucy and Hank. Maximus lets Hank out of the cage, which, mind you, Hank is the one who hurt Maximus, so Maximus, instead of hurting the person who hurt him, actually saved his life. I honestly don't think Maximus does a single thing right in the series, nor does he win a single combat encounter, minus the one with the Fiends. Him saving Hank is just the cherry on top. Maximus gets knocked out by Hank because Maximus doesn't win any encounter in this fucking series. When he comes to, Moldaver is sitting next to Rose, and asks Maximus, "What do you think the Brotherhood will do with infinite power?" Before dying on the spot.
I'm tired, boss.
Dane finds Maximus and believes that it was Maximus who took Moldaver out. So, as one last fuck you to the viewer, Maximus gets promoted for failing. Fuck this character. Maximus almost seems designed to be unlikable. He starts as an annoying piss baby who feels entitled to promotions he doesn't deserve. He spends the entire series doing awful shit and failing at everything, only to either not be punished or be rewarded. Maximus never learns to grow out of his flawed worldview, or his necessity for revenge. Instead, both are dropped because he spends 2 days with Lucy and a few hours in a vault. If I could describe Maximus in one word, I'd choose husk. He is a husk of a character. A character with no depth, no intellect, no ability, and no strong characterization. He is someone so dedicated to revenge he's willing to hurt others, but whose conviction is skin deep and can be changed in a matter of hours. He is a luck 10, intelligence 1 build, an idiot savant, if you will. He is a character who fumbles his way to success every time based on pure convenience and luck, which is grating to watch happen over and over. Some things from the games just shouldn't be adapted to the big screen, and this is one of them. Also, the fact that it is him who realizes the Brotherhood are evil at the end of the show, just because Moldaver tells him they are, is stupid. Doubly stupid, because I don't think someone with as flawed a moral compass as Maximus should be the one to make this observation. What a shite character. A character who starts off unlikable and ends off even more unlikable. A character forged by the trauma of losing his home as a child, and the abuse he was given as a member of the Brotherhood of Steel, but who is incapable of contemplating that trauma because the plot is uninterested in it. A character who makes the Brotherhood look like morons for promoting a known traitor. A character who should be punished for their worldview and actions by the other characters, but isn't. A character who should have had a defining moment at the end of the series. The moment Maximus gets everything he ever wanted, but realizes that it's no longer what he wants. He realized the organization he has built his life goal around, the organization that symbolized his desire for power, the organization that was his home, isn't where his destiny lies. A moment that is ruined because the story doesn't do the legwork to deserve it. Maximus doesn't go through an arc. He's never confronted with his failure and has to grow beyond it. He never has to adapt or learn. He never fixes his moral compass. The plot does everything for him, so that he can just glide through the show as a completely void, incredibly lucky husk of a character. Again, fuck this character. I thought long and hard over who I disliked more between Hank and Maximus. Hank still edges Maximus out because he's just so insane, but Maximus is a close second. Throughout Maximus' story, you may have noticed something. Every Brotherhood character is an asshole. I already went over Maximus in great detail, but the other characters aren't much better. The High Elder only values people who know how to take power no matter what. He wants Maximus to be his right-hand man because Maximus is power-hungry. The High Elder wants to promote people who will do anything to get power for themselves. The High Elder is the one at the top of the power structure, and he wants to be surrounded by people who want to be on the top. Seems like a great idea. This High Elder is also leading this chapter of the Brotherhood down the warpath. He states that he wants to conquer the wastelands so the Brotherhood can reclaim its rightful position as the most powerful faction in the wastes. The High Elder doesn't even know his own history because the Brotherhood has never been a conquering force in any of the games, so I don't know where this High Elder got this notion from, making him look like a dumbass. Knight Titus relishes stringing up squires and torturing them for failure, and would rather berate Maximus than allow himself to be saved by Maximus, which, in a way, is kind of badass and stupid. I would say Thaddeus is a good person, but he bullied Maximus and he pulls a gun out on an innocent wastelander. Like, what does this accomplish? He's trying to help you, Thaddeus. By pulling a gun on him, he's more likely to not help you or purposely injure you. The Brotherhood members bully Thaddeus and Maximus. Dane lets Maximus take the fall for their self-mutilation. The Brotherhood soldiers joke about how they murdered the inhabitants of Philly.
The locals put up a fight, but so did we.
And the Brotherhood eviscerates everyone at the observatory. This is not the Brotherhood of Steel. I don't have an issue with changing factions. In fact, I encourage it. But this is too far. This version of the Brotherhood under the High Elder's leadership is more concerned with conquering towns and people than protecting humanity from itself. The core of the Brotherhood is deeply embedded in their codex. The Brotherhood feels it is their responsibility to collect knowledge and technology so it cannot fall in the wrong hands. The Brotherhood can change. It can debate whether or not to open to outsiders. It can debate who should fall under the Brotherhood's protection. The Brotherhood can debate what technologies should be outright destroyed or saved, but they should never break from their core mission. The Brotherhood does not conquer and lord over people because that would be in direct violation of this mission. This would be like Spider-Man pulling out a Glock 19 and executing Doc Ock. If this happened, there would be outrage because Spider-Man does not kill, due to it being the core of his character. Think of it like Play-Doh. You can alter the shape to whatever you want, but it is always the same material. Same goes for Spider-Man and the Brotherhood. You can change them and some of their characteristics, but the material they're made out of has to stay the same. You can't just take the Play-Doh away from me and give me a big pile of dookie and expect me to think it's the same. That is why this adaptation of the Brotherhood is shit, because it isn't the Brotherhood. If the writers want an evil conquering cult, then make a faction like that. Don't morph the Brotherhood into this, because that would be antithetical to their character. A great adaptation to the game's my ass. Before I move on, I think I should explain something. In the Maximus section, I said something along the lines of, I guess the Brotherhood is a cult now, which would imply they weren't one before. This is technically not true. The Brotherhood is a cult in the games. Kind of. They're more of a pseudo-religious organization, but their dedication to the Brotherhood's core tenets could be labeled as cult-like. Let's just say, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with somebody calling the Brotherhood a cult in the first games, but their identity as a military organization has always preceded their cult-like nature. In the show, this is the opposite. The Brotherhood of Steel is foremost a cult, and a military organization second. The brandings, the weird monks chanting, the rituals, the slavish devotion to the High Elder, the brutal punishments, all put the Brotherhood's cult nature in the forefront of their identity. The Brotherhood honestly looks stupid with all these additions. A once intimidating, morally gray military organization has been reduced to a goofy evil cult. That is why I said I guess the Brotherhood is a cult now, like they hadn't been before. The Brotherhood was never this obviously a cult, and I think that it's a change for the worst. This representation of the Brotherhood is a bastardization of what the Brotherhood of Steel once was, and it just sucks. Other than the Brotherhood being bastardized, when I went through Maximus's journey, you may have noticed I was being a bit nitpicky with some of my criticisms. I mentioned how the characters find each other randomly, character ability inconsistencies, plot contrivances and conveniences, etc. Normally, these are things that I wouldn't really care about. Most stories, unfortunately, have some form of plot contrivance or small errors because nothing is truly perfect. However, the Fallout TV show goes beyond small errors and a few plot contrivances. This show is basically one massive illogical plot contrivance. Characters will have wild motivations that break with what they should want. Characters spawn in the places they need to be constantly. Characters constantly do stupid shit. Plot armor is abundant, and even the dialogue is illogical sometimes, like Maximus not knowing what a boner is. Usually, with plot holes and minor issues, I do a test to see if they are abundant enough to warrant a criticism of a show. I'll usually watch a show one time through completely casually and not really think about the small stuff very much. If I notice a ton of small nitpicks on my casual watch, then I consider these minor issues to be a legitimate flaw of a show. The Fallout show is really bad with the tiny details, and unlike my fucking bank account, this shit adds up over time. Does Lucy and several other characters using a fire at night when Wilksig told her it was dangerous to do so ruin the show? Well, no, it doesn't. What it does do is stretch that suspension of disbelief slightly. The guns having no recoil occasionally doesn't destroy the series, but it stretches the suspension of disbelief again. The ghoul obliterating the Brotherhood Knights by exploiting a design flaw but not using that tactic against Maximus when he was trying to kill him in Philly earlier stretches it a bit more. The NCR going from its peak in power to absolute destruction in only 15 years because only one of their towns was destroyed stretches that believability even more. Again and again until you realize that band snaps and there is no suspension of disbelief left. The viewer then becomes cognizant that the events of the show aren't happening organically, but are being guided by the plot. The investment one has in the story evaporates just like that, because they realize none of the main characters can die because plot armor won't allow it. None of the characters have to outsmart one another because the plot will just teleport them where they need to be, or give them godlike skills to win a fight. Call me nitpicky, but if the events of the story don't feel organic enough, the audience's investment in that story is lessened. This is the pitfall the show falls into, and it cannot get back out of. Tone is one of the most important aspects of any novel, game, TV show, movie, and any story for that matter. This is how the author wants the audience to feel about the characters or story or topic that they are writing about. When a strong tone is established, scenes are able to hit the audience with that emotion the author is going for, whether anger, sadness, despair, hope, etc. It is a powerful tool to grip the audience, and it is one that has to be used with care. The Fallout show doesn't use tone effectively because it has this inability to take anything seriously. The tone for the majority of the Fallout show is goofy and fun. You'll see a character jorking his bacon in one scene. You'll hear characters talking about exploding cocks.
You want to make my cock explode now?
You'll see jokes that just go on way too long and aren't funny.
You won't find anyone more open-minded than me. They come in here with their smelly food and their weird ideas. But these newcomers, let me tell you, if you want to get elected, you have to respect their traditions and tolerate them and not call them surfies. It's awful. It's like you can't make a funny joke about it without offending these guys. I mean, one funny joke I told on maybe 10 occasions.
What was the joke?
I forget. All I know is it was a huge bomb.
And you'll hear quirky dialogue that doesn't make any sense.
I grew up working on a fly farm. I was a shitter, so they'd feed us, and then I'd feed our shit to the flies, mulch them up, and sell it as protein.
Haha, that's so funny. They had Thaddeus shit himself to feed flies so his hometown could get protein. That's so quirky. Oh, wait, there are Brahmin in this universe, and they are quite abundant, which would supply more than enough protein for these people. That's what I mean when I say it's illogical, goofy, odd dialogue just for the sake of it. This over-the-top, goofy, fun tone is fine, but it comes into conflict with the more serious moments that this show has. Let's take the end of the show, which I mentioned earlier. The scene where Hank is telling Lucy how he killed thousands of innocents because Vault-Tec good, competition bad, is played completely straight. The show takes this so seriously, despite it being so stupid. However, in between the scenes of the Vault-Tec executives and Hank telling Lucy he nuked Shady Sands, we get Norm and Bud Askins in Vault 31, where the show just cannot stop making jokes with Bud.
Don't you go in there. Don't read anything in there, or turn on the lights. Don't you access the info tree, or look at the terminal.
I am the overseer here. My orders must be followed. Why isn't this working? This is conflict resolution 101. You'll never find out. Oh, he's gonna find out.
The goofy tone of Bud is not compatible with the serious scene that Hank is having with Lucy. We go from one end of the spectrum to the other. We go from cracking jokes about how Bud is a silly little robot brain to talking about nuking children. The tonal dissonance is horrendous. This last episode should have been played completely straight because it is dealing with heavy topics. But this show cannot take itself seriously for more than 5 minutes. If the show cannot even take itself seriously, then why should I? However, keeping the tone consistent wouldn't help this chain of events. Hank telling Lucy he nuked Shady Sands feels like it should be a joke. It is so illogical, so ridiculous, so outrageous, and so zany that it feels like it was meant to be one big joke. The show, though, thinks that this moronic dialogue from Hank is the second coming of Shakespeare or something, which leads to a disconnect. The show takes this seriously, but I'm over here laughing about how ridiculous this is. The show wants me to feel that pit drop in my stomach when Lee Moldaver says Hank knew Shady Sands, but I end up feeling nothing because the show is incapable of executing this event properly. The moment I think about Hank's plan, I am immediately taken out of the scene and I realize how stupid this story is. The Fallout show does not know how to use tone. Majority of the time, it's just one big joke. And the few times it does try to get serious, there is major tonal dissonance. The tone of this show sucks so bad because it was more interested in writing goofy odd jokes than writing an actual good story people could get invested in. This goofy and fun tone extends to the soundtrack of the show. This show just plays the old 40s, 50s, and 60s songs in the games over and over constantly. Two characters sitting in a room, play the song from 1959. Lucy is walking through the wasteland, quick, play Maybe. Maximus is in a fight scene, quick, play a Johnny Cash song from 1957. We're witnessing war and violence, quick, play I Don't Wanna See You Tomorrow by Nat King Cole. Yeah, that feels appropriate. It's the end of the series. Quick, play We 3 by the Ink Spots. Oh, but these songs are a major part of Fallout's identity. Nah, this song is Fallout's identity. It's a powerful score that evokes a sense of dread and uneasiness in its listener. Whenever you hear those old songs in the games, it's usually diegetically, which means it is occurring within the world. For example, the song Maybe by the Ink Spots is coming from the TV, meaning it could be heard by a character in-universe. In Fallout 2, A Kiss to Build a Dream On by Louis Armstrong, famous for going to the moon of course, is playing with the presentation by Vault-Tec. In every game past Fallout 3, those old songs have come from the Pip-Boys, which are part of the game world. The actual soundtracks of these games aren't the oldies. The soundtrack of Fallout is haunting. It's grim. It has somber moments and triumphant ones. The non-diegetic soundtracks, as in those the characters in the world could not hear, have never been the old upbeat songs. In the show, these old songs comprise at least 65% of all the non-diegetic music. These songs were always a juxtaposition to the world they were a part of. In the first game, Maybe is paired with Nate from fucking Fallout 4 casually committing a war crime, yes, this is true, and the destroyed city. Fallout 2, A Kiss to Build a Dream On, was paired with the Enclave executing innocent vault dwellers. In every game after Fallout 3, the songs were a juxtaposition to the horrendous game world that the player character was a part of. To me, it represented humanity's desire to move on from the horrors of the bombs, an attempt to look at the good of the past when surrounded by the failures of it. The OSTs of the games are bleak because they match the tone of the Fallout world. Fallout is dark, and it always has been. The first game especially is dark and bleak as hell. Even though Fallout 2 is made a bit goofier, the series has always been a dark comedy, with dark being at the forefront. I think the tone of Fallout is best exemplified by New Vegas' DLCs. Fallout New Vegas has 4 DLCs, with Dead Money, Honest Hearts, and Lonesome Road, playing it almost completely seriously. Dead Money especially is dark as hell and very rarely brings levity to the story. Old World Blues is the only DLC that is extremely goofy to the core. You have characters talking about wriggling penises, a robot splurging into a sonic emitter, and you talk to your own brain. It's great. 75% of New Vegas' DLCs are serious, with only 25% being goofy. That's a somewhat reasonable ratio of serious to goofy to go by when making something Fallout themed. The Fallout show is 80% goofy and 20% serious. Actually, it might be 90-10. Whatever the exact percentage is, it isn't a good reflection of the tone of the games, not even the Bethesda ones. Thus, I feel the tone of the show is a failure for missing the balance the games had with levity and seriousness. Even when Fallout was being goofy, there usually was a payoff for that, whether it was good humor or actual good stories. Going back to Old World Blues, that DLC is goofy, but has a genuine message about the utilization of science and the necessity to move on from the past and see the present and future for what they are and could be. Turn that wistful nostalgia into hope that the future could be something better. Old World Blues and New World Hope. The writing never lost its quality just because it was goofy. This isn't the case for the Fallout show. The writing is subpar at best due to its obsequious devotion to goofy odd jokes. Even the goofiest DLC in New Vegas knew how to take itself seriously. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. Going back to the soundtrack though, the use of these songs as non-diegetic soundtrack of the show is bad for the same reason the tone of the show is. It isn't Fallout. The show doesn't understand how these tracks were used in the games, and it feels off. They weren't meant to be non-diegetic and blasting constantly over the most mundane scenes. They were a form of storytelling and world building. A view into the pre-war America and the psyche of the post-war survivors, just trying to make the best of a bad situation. The TV show blasts these songs at every turn because it is cheap brownie points. It's an easy form of nostalgia and nothing more. An unfortunate and pathetic use of these great songs. Real quick, I'm gonna go over ghoulification in the show. Among several retcons this show makes to the previously established lore, I'm looking at you, Shady Sands, which is for some reason in LA now, one of the most glaring is ghoulification. Ghouls in the TV show have regenerative powers and can survive all trauma below the head. This is proven by both the ghoul and Thaddeus. I showed the footage earlier, but yeah, ghouls in the game die from damage taken below the head. You can shoot them in the torso, arms, neck, legs, anywhere, and they will die like any other human because they are just human. They do not have this Wolverine-like regenerative powers unless they are in very intense radiation. The show blatantly retcons ghouls and ghoulification for no reason. Just don't have Thaddeus get shot by the arrow, and the ghouls soak up bullets to the chest and Philly. I wouldn't have an issue with this if the show weren't canon, but it is canon, so what the hell? If you are making a canon addition to a universe, then you have an obligation to follow previously established lore. This is just basic common sense. Then there is the weird anti-feral drug that the ghouls now have to take in order to stay non-feral. In no game has a ghoul ever whipped out this fluid and taken it to stay sane. So where did this new addition to being a ghoul come from? I always thought ghoulification was like dementia, as in it happened slowly and over time due to an extended lifespan. Or that it was just pure luck based. Some people were unlucky and became feral after ghoulification, and others were lucky and retained their humanity. So now ghouls have to take this drug to stay non-feral, almost like they're on a ticking clock, and the drug resets that clock. At least that is my interpretation of it. How did the kid in the fridge not go feral? I'm positive this drug was not in the fridge with him. Why didn't Necropolis have a steady supply of this drug to prevent their inhabitants from going feral? How did Dean Domino not go feral in the Sierra Madre after centuries of not having this drug? How could there ever even be a supply big enough of this drug because the ghoul is constantly taking this shit throughout the show? There is no way that these two shitters would be able to produce enough for the whole ghoul populace. Does a ghoul need the drug only when they notice that they're starting to lose their mental faculties? Is this drug a new addition and that's why we haven't seen it before? Show, can you just fucking explain anything to me? I swear, this damn show will introduce something that completely breaks lore and not give a single explanation. Just say this drug is new and that it only has to be taken by people who are turning feral. It is that easy. They have to be doing this just to mess with me. Break lore and refuse to elaborate and move on like it has always been the case that way. As someone who cares about the lore of the games, especially the West Coast, this is maddening. What even is the liquid the ghoul is taking? Is it some sort of cure for dementia? Is it literally anti-brain rot? It doesn't matter because it's just magic. I also really don't like how this takes the mystery of feral ghouls away. In the games, we never know why the ghouls go feral, and it made them so interesting. Now we know the reason. They off their meds. It's just another example of how carelessly this show adapted the lore of the games. Ghouls went from shambling, rotting, barely alive humans to veritable super soldiers who, like zombies, can only die from a headshot. Actually, that is how they act in the show, like zombies. This is funny, because in Fallout 3, it was made clear that ghouls were not zombies in the you gotta shoot them in the head quest. Todd, how did you sign off on this? They didn't even adapt your game properly. This show is such a joke. The last thing I'll go over before I talked about what I liked in the show, yes, there are actually things I liked, is the progression of the Fallout world. In Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas, with every time skip, the world evolved forward because humans tend to want to live in a higher standard of living. Cities got bigger, there were more people, massive nations formed, radiation lessened over time, supply lines formed, and so on and so forth, and was functioning without the existence of the playable character. The Bethesda games have done a rather poor job of replicating the West Coast in this regard. There is no sense of society progressing on the East Coast. People live in tiny shit shacks surrounded by garbage and rubble, and there is no sense of cohesion between the communities. Fallout 4 is probably the worst in this regard, because without the main character, it feels like this world wouldn't even function. You, as the playable character, have to do everything for the people of the Commonwealth. You have to establish settlements, supply lines, defenses, food, and water because these people are incapable of doing it themselves. The Bethesda Fallout is a stagnant world that cannot move on from the initial stages of nuclear fallout. It feels fake. It makes the player very much aware that they are in a video game, destroying the excellent immersion the older games had. The Fallout show takes place in California, which is one of the most developed places in the Fallout universe. So, does the Fallout show represent the first bit of progress in this universe since 2010?
Fuck no.
This show takes 135 years of progress that has occurred since Fallout 1 and throws it all in the dumpster. California is reduced to a worse state than it was in Fallout 1. There are no bigger settlements like the Hub or Boneyard. There are only shitty pieces of garbage assembled into towns. The NCR headquarters is probably the largest non-Brotherhood settlement we see in the show, and it still looks smaller than the Hub. There are large swaths of no civilization and no sense of order or general law because the NCR is gone. This show really wants its lawless cowboy vibes. Think of the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that is definitely what this show is going for with its three main characters. This Wild West vibe the show is going for does not work in California. California is too developed for that type of lawlessness. Even if the NCR collapses like it does in the show, there would still be some order as new players would just take the stage in their place. There would still be massive settlements like New Reno, Vault City, and San Fran. The show treats the destruction of Shady Sands almost as if it's the end of organized civilization on the surface, which it isn't. Shady Sands wasn't the only big town. Hell, it wasn't even the only massive town just in the NCR. The world of the Fallout show feels empty and like nobody inhabits it. It is a massive downgrade from the world that the West Coast built, and it is a damn shame to see this world regress so far in just 15 years since New Vegas. If you want your lawless, Wild West-ass story, then have it take place somewhere else. California is incompatible with that type of story. Please just let this world progress for once. I could go on for hours about the flaws of this show and what I didn't like. I could talk about the weird writing choices, like how Lucy loses her finger only to get it back 4 seconds later. The ghoul also gets his finger back because ghouls regenerate, so this scene was functionally pointless. I could go on about the weird dialogue.
You're a coward. You know that shit?
We all are, Norm. That's why we live in a vault.
Ah, yes, because escaping nuclear holocaust makes you a coward, of course. I could go on and on about this show, but I hope everything I have stated before already does enough to show you why I feel this show is bad. Before I conclude this video, I will briefly go over what I liked in this show, because despite how it may seem from this video, the TV show isn't the worst thing ever made. It isn't all bad. For one, I think the effects in this show are actually pretty good. Sometimes they look a bit janky, but I would still consider them pretty good. The creatures look great, like the Yaogwai, Gulper, and Radroaches, and are faithful recreations of these creatures. I appreciate the sound design they used in the show, like I heard the Fallout 1 level up sound effect when Lucy reached the NCR. I like that they used the 10mm pistol design from Fallout 1. I like that the code for Cold Fusion was the date that Fallout 1 came out. Some of the fight scenes are actually pretty fun, with my personal favorite being the ghouls fight with the inhabitants of Philly. It's a shame that they had to break lore to do that fight though. The extreme level of gore is nice to see and very faithful to how gory the games are. The acting in the show is pretty great across the board. I thought Ella Purnell, Kyle MacLachlan, and especially Walton Goggins do a great job in their roles. I really wish they had better material to work with because poor Kyle MacLachlan has dog shit to work with as Hank. The only two characters I liked in the show were Lucy and the Ghoul. The Ghoul is the only character in this show I would call decent or above average. It's pretty hard to not like him, as he's just a badass brutal mercenary. He gets some badass scenes, and he has probably my favorite scene in this entire pile of shite. The scene I am referring to is where he's watching his old tape. Previously, when the Ghoul was Cooper, he didn't want to do that scene because he is supposed to be the good guy, to which the writer of the show tells him that audiences want to see that a good man could be pushed to do horrible things. When the Ghoul watches that production through the TV, the audience, and probably the Ghoul too, realizes that the Ghoul has become that good man, pushed to do horrible things due to the bombs. Compared to other movies and TV shows, it isn't even that powerful of a moment, but in the show, I think it's the best scene because it is wordless and slightly subtle. I like the last line that the Ghoul has with Hank, and how he shoots him across the face because Hank is an ass. The best part about the Ghoul is that he is likable, despite doing equally, if not worse things than Maximus. The show never treats the Ghoul like he is a good guy, which is great. I will say, as the Ghoul, he doesn't get much development, but I don't think it detracts much from his character. As Cooper, I actually liked watching him slowly lose his faith in Vault-Tec and America, but my enjoyment was immediately reversed when the payoff was
by dropping the bomb ourselves.
Overall, the Ghoul is a decent character, and easily the best in this show. He's not extraordinary, but just good. Lucy is also an okay character, but not as good as the ghoul, unfortunately. Lucy has the very standard loss of innocence arc during the events of this show. This is probably the safest and blandest arc you could do with a Vault Dweller going to the surface, but I can't bash it too much for being poorly executed. It is decently handled. The worst parts of her character are her rushed romance with Maximus and the fact that she brushes off the fact that Maximus let somebody die. Seems like it would conflict with her golden rule. I like where she ends off with the ghoul, and a part of me is interested to see where her character will go. Lucy is just a very standard character. There isn't much to say about her. Solid 5 out of 10, maybe 6 out of 10 character. The shit in Vault 33 with Norm is fine, I guess. I thought it was kind of boring, and the payoff, like literally everything with Vault-Tec, is horrible. I like the scene of him hacking though, and I like that Norm is a high intelligence and perception character build. The best thing about this show, and the greatest praise I can give it, is that it is the first Bethesda product I have ever experienced that hasn't been horrendously buggy and glitchy on release. So good job with that. The Fallout TV show is not good. Its satire is as deep as a puddle and as subtle as a boar in your living room. It disregards lore at every opportunity and breaks it whenever possible. Elon Musk's net worth can't hold a candle to the number of retcons this show makes to the lore. This show has garbage characters with crazy motivations and worse writing. This show cannot take itself seriously and has the worst use of tone I have seen in a long time. This show has a soundtrack that regurgitates the oldies from the games without understanding their purpose. This show does not understand Fallout. The best and most succinct way I could describe the Fallout TV show is like this. It gets worse the more you think about it. The more you think about it, the more you realize the plot makes no sense. The more you realize the writing is bad. And the more you realize this show does not deserve the praise it has received. One might find enjoyment from this show if they turn their brain off completely while watching. The funny lines, fun action, easily palatable anti-corporate message might be enough to produce enjoyment. However, one should not have to turn their brain off to enjoy a story. A truly good story can withstand scrutiny and should engage the viewer, not force them to disengage. Dumb, fun stories have their place, but it is paramount that they understand that they are just dumb and fun. The Fallout show is stupid, but thinks it is some poignant piece of literature. There are some TV shows and movies that are so bad that they are good, but the Fallout TV show does not fall into that category. It is simply bad, and a far cry from the quality of the games it is attempting to adapt. The more one thinks about this show, the more they might realize that this show does not deserve an 8.4 out of 10 on IMDb and a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. They may begin to realize that this show should be an example of how not to adapt a video game into the cinematic medium. The more one thinks about this product, the more they might realize that the Fallout TV show is unworthy.